Hey guys, what is going on? My name is Tom with Amped Airsoft, and today we are doing another FCU video. This time we are going over the Wolverine Spartan board. So we just recently did the Wolverine Premium FCU. We are going to be going over the Wolverine Spartan board, which has a lot of overlapping features, just a lot of different ways of interfacing with it, as you can probably see. There's a lot of different things going on here, but we'll talk about that and get into it. Okay, so navigating this FCU, like I said, this is a little bit different. Main difference is the fact that this is a trigger board and an FCU, so you only have one unit to worry about instead of two different boards to worry about in most other situations where there is a trigger board and an FCU, a separate FCU wired into that trigger board. In this case, everything is hardwired in, and you are doing all your programming with the trigger itself, the little selector position sensor back here, so you're going to be doing stuff in semi, you're going to be doing programming in full auto, and you're also going to be controlling programming mode with connecting and disconnecting the battery. The reason I have a engine up here, I have a Wolverine engine up here, is because the way this was actually designed was kind of to be done on the fly with air hooked up. So I'm going to show you that right now, since you don't have an LED to go off of, you don't have an LCD display to go off of, you really only have the feedback that you can hear and see coming from the engine. So I'm going to hook this up to air right now and we will get into it. And like I said, so basically we got a Wolverine Reaper engine here hooked up to an Amped IGL. We have the Spartan board here, trigger board and FCU, and then we just have it hooked up to a battery. I'm going to be doing everything and programming everything using the micro switch that is on this board, the micro switch on the back that controls selector position, and I'm going to be doing other stuff by disconnecting and connecting the battery. We'll get into it. It's not that complicated of a board. It's actually pretty intuitive once you start working with it, but it can be a little bit intimidating because there isn't a lot of readout. Like I said, once you start working with it, it's actually pretty intuitive. Only other thing to go over on the board outside of the trigger and the selector on the back here is this little accessory port. This is for accessory hookups such as box mag sensing or any other type of accessory that you want to hook up that is going to be controlled by the pull of a trigger. So the max LED units are going to be another example of that. That is what this port is for. So to start off, before we get really deep diving into it, I'm going to go over some common issues that you can run into with this unit. First one being, it's a trigger board. So if you overpull the trigger a little bit or you're a little bit hard on the trigger and you fry this sensor here, this old micro switch here, then you can't program it anymore because you've destroyed that trigger unit. Likewise on the back, if for some reason your selector switch is a little bit not fitted properly to this sensor here, or it's a little sharp and it shears this away, you would then lose adjustability there. That's all about how you install this and some stuff that you want to be careful about when installing this, and some extra things to take in mind, because you don't want to damage those two components. Those are the main components of this board that can be damaged. And those are some common issues we see new people when they start working with this. If they are, spamming the trigger a lot, they're over pulling, they heavy pull on the trigger, or they have not, shimmed their selector plate or modified it enough to interface with this accurately, then you're going to run into some issues when programming it, because those are the two main ways you're programming it. Other common issue is kind of a similar one that we went over with the Wolverine FCU Premium Edition. So this board is going to come not at the highest dwell setting, and it's not going to come at the lowest dwell setting, but it's going to come from the factory at a very low dwell setting. So you might feel like when you first install this that it's not firing properly, like your FPS is really low or your shots are all over the place or something like that. Generally, that's because of the factory setting of the dwell. I generally, when I install these, automatically put it to max dwell for most customers so they don't have to think about it, and then I let them tune it after that. That's probably the most common one, is the dwell is set too low, and a lot of people think it's broken because of that. Honestly, it's just how it comes from factory. It's not a big deal. It's just going into programming mode and setting it to the max dwell, and I'll show you guys how to do that. Another issue that can come up when working with this FCU in particular is, if you'll notice, this wire harness is only so long. I'm not even off the camera right now with how long this wire harness is. And from the gearbox where the trigger is sitting to where this wire comes, it will reach to about the end of your buffer tube, but it's kind of a stretch depending on how you run it in the gearbox. A lot of times this was designed to be run in your pistol grip with an IGL or some airline in there. So a lot of times people will have a problem fitting this down into your grip to make it work, or you don't have a base plate anymore on your grip to hold the battery in place. So what I recommend oftentimes for people when wiring this is you drill the hole for your IGL a little bit wider than what is recommended. Generally, we recommend drilling out the hole to be a 1/2 inch in diameter for a regular IGL, amped IGL, to fit through. The Wolverine systems will come with their own airline, and that is a lot thinner of an airline than our amped IGLs. We recommend drilling it out a little bit bigger for anything that you're wiring to the grip. And in this case, we do recommend wiring this to the grip because you will sometimes not have enough room. If you don't have enough room to reach the whole way to the buffer tube, they do make extensions for this. They're very simple ones. They're just a male JST to a female JST. They're very simple. I like running it to the grip. I think it's actually a lot easier. And then you can run an air stock if you want. So now it's in the grip. You don't got to worry about that. But that's one of the other common problems, if you want to call it that. So with this hooked up and the batteries hooked in, I'm just going to show you quickly that this is all operating. So right now I have this hooked up to air. I'm going to press this micro switch here. So I'm just going to press this. So it's in semi. I'm going to press the back sensor here with my other finger. Now I'm in full auto. Off the trigger, on the trigger, off the trigger. Okay, so this is operating fine. That's how it's going to normally operate. Okay, so general operation and entering programming mode. You are going to do 2 ways to get into programming mode. The first way is going to be holding down the trigger for 10 seconds in either semi or automatic. And that is going to cycle you through your semi full auto, your semi 3-round burst, and your semi settings. So basically what full auto is going to be doing. To do that, what you're going to do is you are going to hold down this trigger with the battery connected. Okay, so I'm going to hold down the trigger for 10 seconds, and it should be in 3-round burst after 10 seconds. 1, that should be long enough. I'm going to hold down the selector button now. It's in 3-round burst. Okay, we're going to do that one more time. I'm not going to count this time. We'll just do a time card. All right, now we are going to test it again. I am holding down this button again to put it in full auto, and it should shoot semi. It's shooting semi. So now this is semi-locked if you need to use this for a DMR. Now that it's semi-locked, and that is how you would program it. I'm going to hold it down for another 10 seconds, and it should go back to semi and full auto mode. Enter another SpongeBob time card. After that now, I'm going to hold down the selector on the back, and it should be back in full auto. And it is. So, doing those 10-second cycles without unplugging the battery, I'm making that very clear right now because next steps are going to be involving unplugging the battery. But holding down that trigger in semi-auto for 10 seconds will cycle through the 3 cycle modes. Those cycle modes, again, are semi, full auto, semi, 3-round burst, and semi and semi. That would be how you do a semi-lock for a DMR. Okay, moving on past that, what we are going to do is we are going to talk about the main programming mode, which is going to affect only 2 settings. Much like the Wolverine Premium FCU, there is only a rate of fire and dwell setting that we are going to be working with here. I am going to unplug the battery, and then while holding down the trigger in semi or full auto, I am going to then plug the battery in while holding the trigger down. So I'm going to hold the trigger down. This is going to look comical because this is not in a gun and is not as easy to do. That whole time I've been holding this down. Okay, so now what is going to happen to confirm I'm in programming mode, I'm going to pull the trigger lightly and it's not going to do anything until I release. So finger down, up. So it's firing when I release. That means I am in programming mode. So again, down, up. It's firing when I release. We're going to talk about dwell first. So dwell is going to be controlled in programming mode in semi-auto, which means this button is not going to be depressed in semi-auto. So your dwell is going to be controlled and programmed by holding the trigger down. While I'm holding the trigger down, the engine is going to go off while I'm holding it down. And you will hear, as the engine is firing, that the sound of the engine is going to sound lighter, 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 and lighter until it double taps very loudly. The double tapping sound means that it's at its maximum setting, and then it's going to decrease the whole way through. If I want to bring the dwell up instead of down, I'm going to quickly double tap the trigger to go up in the dwell settings. That way you don't have to cycle the whole way through every time when you're like, oh, it was there. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to hold this trigger down and we're going to listen and watch this thing fire. Okay. So that was full. So I don't know if that's going to come through very well on the video with the audio, but as it goes from the double tap shot to the last ones, right before it cycles back to that double tap shot, it does get quieter. You can feel the air volume go down, especially between the last setting and the highest setting. There's definitely a difference, but that is going to be how you control your dwell. And like I said, I'm going to hold that down. I'm going to go down a few. And then I'm going to double tap this trigger, and that's going to go back up. And to illustrate this, I'm going to double tap this a few times. Now I'm back up to the highest setting. That's why it double tapped for me. Okay, so for rate of fire programming, what we're going to do is I'm going to hold down the button that would generally put it into full auto, which is going to be your selector switch on your gun, and then I'm going to hold the trigger down, and it is going to cycle through using 3-round bursts and increase rate of fire with each 3-round burst, and you'll be able to hear that. And that's the lowest setting. So that is how you're going to adjust your rate of fire on the unit. Like I said, you're going to basically enter programming mode by unplugging the battery, holding the trigger down, and then plugging the battery in while you are holding the trigger down. And then you're going to put it in full auto. That will then put you into the rate of fire adjustment setting because you're in programming mode. And then you'll cycle through. Semi-auto is dwell. Full auto is rate of fire in programming mode, to put it simply. To exit programming mode, all you're going to do is unplug your battery, plug it back in without holding the trigger down, and now you're out of programming mode. And back in semi. I'm going to hold this down and go into full auto. And because we lowered that rate of fire, it's going to be a little slow on me. And that's basically it, guys. There's not a lot going on with this engine. That is pretty much the entirety of programming mode. So there's 3 different settings for programming mode, right? We went over all 3 of them. And now hopefully you can see why you need to have this hooked up to an engine and an air source so that you can actually see what's going on with the programming. Again, there's no lights on here. There's no LCD readout for you. All your feedback is going to be from how the gun is firing as you're tuning it. I highly recommend doing this with the upper receiver off at first to get a feel for what's happening, and then putting your upper receiver on and using a chrono to help see where you are and how you can be dialed in as much with a chrono. Okay guys, so as far as we're gonna hop into compatibility now that we're done with programming. So as far as what is this unit compatible with? So obviously it's compatible with any Wolverine electronic unit. I do believe the connector, like the actual plug on the back of this solenoid, is the same size connector as on the back of a jack. And I believe it is the same size connector as the gate units as well on the back of their solenoids. Their solenoids are a different size of solenoid, but the plug I believe is the same. So I do believe this is compatible with those, if you ever wanted to use it for one of those for some reason. But it is mainly compatible with the Wolverine Reaper, the electronic version of it, and the Inferno. You're mainly going to see these with Infernos, particularly inside of MTWs. The reason I'm going to bring up MTWs is because the MTW uses a version of the Spartan Electronics board in it. It does not use their premium FCU, it uses a Spartan Electronics board. However, it is modified to have extra features that the MTW has. It also has optical sensors and a few other features and upgrades specifically tailored towards the MTW. So if you're ever trying to program your MTW, the programming is going to be basically the exact same as the regular Spartan board. So we're not going to go over the MTW specific version here. We're just going to go over the general tuning of this. But as far as compatibility goes, I did want to mention the MTW because it's using effectively the same system. Outside of that, this was designed for Wolverine units. It is not really intended for other companies' units, but I do believe you can hook it up to Jackson Pulsar units. So guys, that concludes the video and overview of the Wolverine Spartan Edition FCU and Triggerboard. If you guys have any questions, please leave a comment down below in the comment section. Please like this video if we were informative enough and you understood everything I said. If I wasn't, please reach out to us. We will explain it in more detail, and we will try and help you out with any issues you are having with this particular FCU or any FCU that you're currently working with. Guys, thanks so much again. My name is Tom from Amped Airsoft, and I hope this was helpful.